If you keep up with the channel, you may have noticed that there was a longer break between videos than usual. That's because I was on vacation. I went to Orlando, and naturally while I was down there, I had to spend at least a little bit of time at Walt Disney World, specifically the Magic Kingdom. I was planning on filming while I was down there anyways. After the experience I got filming at D23 and Disneyland, I was itching to get back to Disney World to film something there. The original idea was just a day in the lifestyle vlog, showing what my typical trip entails. However, as those of you who have read the title know, I went a little overboard, because I ended up being there for 12 hours! I don't go on vacation very often, so I tend to hit them hard when I do, especially at Disney. When I was at Disneyland, I waited an hour and a half for Haunted Mansion Holiday. But even this is excessive. I could try and convey the how and why, but why do that when I can just bring you along for the ride? So that's where we're at. This is everything that can happen when you spend 12 hours at the most magical place on Earth. But first, contrary to what you might think, I actually don't go to the Disney parks very often. I don't live in Central Florida, and I don't live in Southern California. I can't just drop everything and decide to go one day. There was a time where I would be out there at least once a year, and I'm well aware that I was incredibly lucky and, dare I say, privileged enough to do so. But that time's passed. I'm a working, tax-paying adult, and I can't really plan for those kinds of vacations. I don't have an annual pass anymore. Benefits like Magical Express are gone. And then COVID happened, which kept me from traveling for a good 2 years. So if you ask me questions like, what do you think of Runaway Railway, or Toy Story Land, or Ratatouille, or Cosmic Rewind, my answer is gonna be, I don't know. I haven't seen them. However, I am still privileged and lucky enough that I can manage to squeeze in a day or two at the park every once in a while. Back at the end of March, I was in Orlando for MegaCon. It's a big fan convention that gets held every year. It's one of my favorites. I've been a bunch of times. And while I was down there, I went to the Magic Kingdom for one day. Why Magic Kingdom? It has all of my favorite attractions, it's got the best vibes, and it's the park where I can spend one day there and come away feeling satisfied and fulfilled. Plus, I only had room for the one day. I feel like if you've only got one day to be at Walt Disney World and you had to pick only one park, it should be Magic Kingdom. That was probably a lot more backstory than you needed for what's essentially a Magic Kingdom vlog. Again, this isn't supposed to be any kind of in-depth retrospective or review. This is just me showing you what I did during my day at the park, and you can draw your own conclusions from there. I woke up at around 7:30 a.m., got dressed, and hopped in a Lyft to get to Transportation and Ticket Center. For those that don't know, T&T is where the parking lots for Magic Kingdom are located. From there, you hop on the monorail or ferry to get to the actual park. Unless you're staying on property, you can't actually be dropped off near the park entrance. So I got there, walked through security, hopped on the monorail, arriving at the main gate at 8:30ish. In recent years, they've begun opening up Main Street before the rest of the park opens. You're able to walk through the shops and up to the castle before the rest of the park opens. They've even moved the opening show to the castle, instead of at the train station. With how many people come to the park nowadays, it's definitely smarter. I'll take it over being crammed between the train station and the turnstiles any day. I walked down Main Street up to Cinderella Castle to watch the opening show. I visited on one of the last days for the 50th anniversary, so I managed to catch the special 50th opening show. Last time I visited, I made the mistake of waiting at the base of the castle to walk through it to get to Fantasyland. By the time they managed to open it, most people are already at where they need to be. So this time, I followed the crowds around it to get to the first ride of the day, Peter Pan's Flight. The line was backed up all the way to Liberty Square, but got moving pretty quickly. Peter Pan is one of those rides that has a long line for the entire day, so get that one done early. Once I did that, I went over to Liberty Square and decided to hop in line for the Haunted Mansion. The wait time was long, but that wasn't a problem for me, because long waits mean I get plenty of time to film everything. The wait might have taken even longer than it would have because I was telling people to go around me because I wanted to capture everything on film. It started as just getting B-roll, but quickly spiraled out of control when I got the idea to do a standalone video. Don't ask me when it's coming out because I do not know. After that, I grabbed lunch at Columbia Harbor House. I had a fish sandwich and it was okay, before hopping back in line for the Haunted Mansion again. And by the time I got off it, it had a 5-minute wait, so I got back on a third time. Yeah, I always try to see how many times I can go on the Haunted Mansion in one day. I think my current record is 6. By the time I got done with all that, it was noon, one of the busiest parts of the day. So I went back to Fantasyland and headed for Mickey's PhilharMagic. PhilharMagic is what I call a reliable attraction. By that I mean it's a place where you can sit down and relax for a while without having to worry about a long wait time, regardless of how busy the park is on a given day. Magic Kingdom's got a bunch of those, so use those when you can. Once I did that, I headed back for Storybook Circus. This got added when they put in New Fantasyland. I got a Rice Krispie treat and a slushie from the Big Top souvenir shop, and I went on Dumbo. Dumbo actually does something really cool with the queue. They have a little play area where kids can go in and play around until it's their turn for the ride. On busier days, they set aside it as part of the queue. You get a little buzzer and can sit down for a bit until it goes off. Then you're on the ride. That's really smart. I'd love to see more queues like that implemented. Hey, in case you haven't heard, the train's up and running again. It was closed for a good 4 years because of Tron construction, and it's finally back open and I got to ride it. I just did a full circuit, starting in Fantasyland and ending in Fantasyland. Again, that's one of those rides that usually has a short wait where you can just sit and relax for 10 minutes before continuing with your day, and it helps you get around the park faster. I did get to see a little bit of the construction going on for Tiana's Bayou Adventure. I have no pictures of it because I didn't want to photograph people doing their jobs, but trust me, it was there. Once again, I'm super excited for this ride, and people who are genuinely mad about it honestly need to get over themselves. I hopped on Winnie the Pooh afterwards. Always a fun time. I made a whole video about it a while back, which you should totally go watch. In fact, I've got a whole Walt Disney World playlist that you should watch. While you're at it, check out my On Location playlist for all the videos I film on location. Shameless plugs because I have nothing to say about this part of the day. Finally, I made it out of Fantasyland and headed for Tomorrowland. Hopped on the People Mover and some jerk had his flash on in the Space Mountain section. Went on Carousel Progress, got to see the makeover the animatronics had, picked up some ice cream at Aunt Gravity's. They gutted Merchant of Venus and made it extra seating for that restaurant, with some cool posters, including one for Timekeeper. I love details like this. It makes the land feel more lived in. Though maybe I'm just saying that after seeing how much of a hot mess Tomorrowland is at Disneyland. I don't know. I ran back into the warm embrace of Fantasyland and hopped on It's a Small World. I'll talk more about Lightning Lane and Standby later, but I think Small World handles the balancing of the lines the best. There are 2 boats at the loading dock at a time. The boat in the front is reserved for Lightning Lane. The boat in the back is reserved for Standby, so they don't have to merge the lines anywhere. That's really smart. I think they should consider that system going forward when building attractions. All the parades were done by this point, which meant it was safe to go into Frontierland and Adventureland. Finally hit up Country Bear Jamboree and the Tiki Room, which are always must visits. Then I realized I hadn't been on Haunted Mansion in a while, so I went back for that. This was my final ride on it for the day, meaning I rode the Haunted Mansion a grand total of 4 times. One of these days I'm gonna do a trip where I do nothing but ride the Haunted Mansion until some poor maid or butler throws me out. That was a joke. Please don't do that. Cast members get enough grief without idiots trying to clout chase. Once I did that, I hit up Memento Mori to pick a couple of things. I got a few pins, a couple of prints, and this really beautiful Constant statue. I saw a listing on eBay for it a few months ago and knew I needed to have it. I didn't find it anywhere at Disneyland, but I finally got it here. It was at this point that I realized I screwed up. You see, when I usually stay this late into the evening, I always make it a goal to be out of the parks by the fireworks. By the time I got out, I only had 15 minutes before Disney Enchantment started. I squeezed through the crowds, cut through backstage. I wanted to make it out before it started, but by the time I got to the exit, I had only a couple minutes to spare. And at that point, why bother? So I did watch Enchantment. And by watch, I mean heard the soundtrack from a bench on Main Street. It isn't a complete picture of the show, I realize, but I really like Disney Enchantment. It had great music, I love the new song for the show, and it's just a great showcase of Disney magic. For some reason, this was super hated on when it premiered, and I have no idea why. I think people were just mad about Happily Ever After going away. I never really got the hype for that show, so maybe I'm just less of a harsh critic. Whatever, Wishes is better than both of them. Once that was done, I picked up a couple things from Main Street before heading for the monorail. By the time I got back to my hotel room, it was 11 o'clock. So yes, I did indeed spend 12 hours in the Magic Kingdom. For those of you who haven't been keeping up with park news, Lightning Lane is the new paid FastPass system that's been in the park for a couple of years. Instead of them being complimentary with your ticket, you have to pay extra to skip the lines. And some rides you have to pay even more. I did not use Lightning Lane on this trip, nor am I planning to in the future. Not because I'm against the concept entirely, but for my purposes, I don't think I'll ever need to. I find that even with only going through standby, I can still get on pretty much all the attractions I want to in a day. I experimented with this on my last couple trips, but this year I did it more consistently. I looked at the posted wait times when I got in line, then I started a timer on my phone to see how long it really took to get on the ride. This isn't a perfect science as there are a lot of different factors at play. Like, when I timed the Haunted Mansion, I only counted how long it took me to get into the foyer, as opposed to getting into the Doom Buggy. In my eyes, the foyer, stretchy room, and even the loading zone are all part of the experience. And there were some other times when I forgot to stop the timer, or stopped it too early. Don't take this as a perfect science. These are just some observations about the posted wait times versus the actual wait times. Peter Pan's flight had a 60-minute wait. I was on it in 47. The Haunted Mansion had a 60-minute wait. I was on in 22. Later that day, it had a 40-minute wait, and I was on in 45. Dumbo had a 50-minute wait. I was on in 20. Winnie the Pooh had a 50-minute wait. I was on in 40. The People Mover had a 15-minute wait. I was on in 10. It's a Small World had a 20-minute wait. I was on in 25. It took me 16 minutes to get aboard the train in Fantasyland. And PhilharMagic, Carousel of Progress, Country Bears, and the Tiki Room were all walk-ons. Like I said, there are a lot of different factors at play when it comes to how long a wait will actually take. It's a Small World has a unique loading procedure. I rode Peter Pan first thing in the morning, and because they only just started up the ride, it took longer to get on board. And rides like the Jungle Cruise are always going to have long waits because it takes an eternity to get people on and off the boats. But in general, the posted wait times are always going to be longer than the actual wait times. Sometimes considerably so. Why? I think there's two reasons. The cynical reason is that if the lines are super long, it makes paying for Lightning Lane a lot more appealing. But for the people in the standby line, finding out the line didn't take that long to get through makes you feel good. Even before all this stuff, I always felt like standby was shorter than what the actual posted wait time was. However, this is not a perfect science. We definitely need more data. So if you're going on a trip in the near future, maybe do this experiment yourself. Now, with all of that aside, I completely understand why Lightning Lane is so hated. Not only is it just another example of the recent, let's squeeze money out of as many people as possible schemes from Disney, I do think it makes the lines worse. It's a lot of extra, unnecessary planning added onto the trip. I have people I know IRL come up and ask me for vacation advice, and anytime they ask about Lightning Lane, my brain just turns to mush. I feel like I can navigate most quirks about Disney vacations pretty well, but I genuinely have no idea how the system works. Plus, it just negatively impacts every other guest experience. You have to stop the standby line every 5 seconds to let the Lightning Lane people pass, making standby longer in the process. Your mileage may vary. I think I have a pretty high tolerance for lines. I stood 3 hours to meet Chris Sabat a couple days after this. But for others, people with chronic illnesses, the neurodivergent, this just isn't practical. Most people don't want to spend their entire vacation waiting in a line. Those in the know are aware that there are certain times of the year that you should just avoid going to Disney. Any major holiday, the middle of July and August, and spring break. I went the last week of March. Guess what was happening? If the wait times and footage haven't tipped you off, the park was absolutely slammed. Not only were there a bunch of people there, but there were a bunch of people there in large groups. You know it's spring break when you're standing in line and there's 10 guys with matching t-shirts? I was lucky the weather wasn't too bad, or else it would have been unbearable. Look, it wasn't my fault MegaCon got scheduled 2 months earlier this year. When I talk about the schedule, you might have noticed I spent most of my time on the east side of the park. That's because the west side was damn near impossible to get to during the afternoon. Back in Frontierland is where the parade starts. And ever since things have been opened back up, they've been going hard with them. Seriously, every hour on the dot was a parade or a character cavalcade. If you get stuck in Frontierland or Adventureland when one of those starts, you're gonna be in there for a good 30-40 minutes. I didn't go back there until they were done for the day. Which sucks because Tiki Room and Country Bears are back there. Those are two of my big, reliable attractions when the park's the busiest. But the parades and cavalcades always happen during those busy hours too. Since I know a lot of you are going to ask, no, I did not get to ride Tron, because I didn't even know it was running. It wasn't set to open until a few days after I visited, but they must have been doing soft openings. And I didn't learn about them until I was in Tomorrowland after all the virtual queues for the day had been picked up. Look, maybe I'm just an idiot, but I think that could have been communicated a little better. Also, if you're staying off property like I was, you really can't afford to stay all the way to closing. The line to get onto the monorail to get back to ticket and transportation was nuts, and I still had a few hours of the day left. Maybe you wouldn't mind that, but with how much ticket prices have gone up, you might not feel like you're getting your money's worth. I'm aware that most of these problems seem minor. Were they enough to ruin the day? Of course not. But I do think it's important for me to be honest and talk about all my experiences, including all the little annoyances. I just got done reading Disneyland by Richard Snow. It's a super in-depth look at early Disneyland history and everything that went into making it. If you're at all interested in Disney, I'm pretty sure you are if you're watching my videos, I highly recommend it. There's one bit in it that really stuck with me. Jack Lindquist was an advertiser working for Kelvinator. They were a corporate sponsor in Tomorrowland. He was in the park on opening day and did not have a good time. His son got on the canal boats and was stuck there for almost an hour. However, despite the ordeal, he was still intrigued by the park and ended up becoming the park's ad manager. In December of 1955, he was walking down Main Street and overheard a family talking. A mother, father, son, and daughter. The daughter looked up at the mom and said to her that this was better than Santa Claus. The family had forgone Christmas presents to go to Disneyland. As Lindquist recalled, this one brief moment proved to be my most meaningful memory of the park. because it symbolized what we meant to people. We are not a cure for cancer, we are not going to save the world, but if we can make people happy for a few hours a day, we are doing something wonderful. That's kind of how I am with Magic Kingdom. Even if it's crowded as hell, even if the lines are 5 miles long, even if it's hot and humid, I can always find something to enjoy and walk away satisfied. And maybe that's circumstantial. These days, I don't know when my next Disney trip will be. So anytime I do make it out there, I feel like I have to make the most of it and do as much as possible. And even with some of the little annoyances brought on by recent changes in scheduling and crowd control, I still had a lot of fun. I don't know what your takeaway from this video will be. Maybe this put you off visiting. Maybe this made you start planning your next trip. Like I said, this isn't meant to be a definitive review of the park, or an in-depth look at how a trip works. This has just been me talking about some of my experiences. I'll let you draw what you will from there. I don't really do these kinds of videos that often, but if you like chill and fun travel vlogs, I highly recommend checking out my friend Victoria's channel. She does all sorts of videos talking about different vacation spots, and not just Disney ones. I'm not much of a vlog person myself, but I really enjoy her videos. She deserves way more subscribers. But that concludes the video. Thank you so much for watching as always, and I will talk to you guys soon. Take care.